I want to welcome everyone to 10 West End and the 2023 St. Louis Park State of the Community event. We're so pleased to host you today. I'm Alexis Stritecky, property manager for Bridge Commercial Real Estate, and in January 2023, I joined the Bridge team after the property's acquisition in November of 2022. My role involves overseeing the day-to-day operations of the property to ensure its smooth function and maintain tenant satisfaction. Here are a few fun facts about 10 West End. This 11-story, 343,000 square foot Class A office building within the West End is situated on the border of St. Louis Park and Golden Valley. The office tower is in St. Louis Park, and the 1,214 parking structure is in Golden Valley. The building was developed during the pandemic years with no pre-leasing and officially opened in 2021. In November of 2022, it was purchased by Bridge Investment Group and is managed by our management arm, Bridge Commercial Real Estate. Upon purchase, 10 West End was approximately 61% leased. Within this last year, Bridge has brought the building to approximately 89% leased. The interior design of the building takes a look and feel of an industrial warehouse conversion project, but is complemented by a modern glass and steel frame exterior. Amenity features of the building include 3,500 square feet of retail space on the ground level, large training and conference room facilities, a fitness center, locker rooms, an indoor bike storage room, and an indoor-outdoor rooftop tenant lounge and patio with breathtaking views of the Minneapolis skyline. The building was originally built as LEED Silver for core and shell under the U.S. Green Building Council standard, but this year, Bridge also achieved LEED Gold for operations and maintenance, helping to support the City of St. Louis Park's climate action goals. We're also under application review for a WELL certification issued by the International Well Building Institute. Following today's remarks, we'll be conducting a short tour of the building and invite all of those who are able to join. Now, I'd like to introduce you to our next speaker, Chris Coleman, President and CEO of Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity. Mr. Coleman joined Twin Cities Habitat after serving as mayor of St. Paul from 2006 to 2018. As mayor, Chris was a champion for economic development, education, and racial equality. From 2013 to 2014, Chris was the president of the National League of Cities, a bipartisan coalition of leaders from across the country. Prior to his election of mayor, Chris was an investment advisor for RBC and served for 6 years on the St. Paul City Council.
Well, thank you so much. I'm honored to be able to say a few words at Jake Spano's 8th and last State of the Community address. Though what wasn't included in my resume is that Jake worked for me when I was in City Hall, which makes me really wonder why, after working with me, what you would ever get the idea that you wanted to run for office yourself, and certainly to run for mayor. He should have known better. But then as I was thinking about it, what I realized was that Jake was always in charge of the fun stuff. So he got to run like Red Bull crashed ice while the rest of us were dealing with, protesters on freeways and various things. And so I think he went into this totally unprepared, thinking that it was just a blast to be mayor and not the challenges of day-to-day actually running a city. When I was mayor, there was the popular book that went around the National League of Cities or the U.S. Conference of Mayors, was a book called If Mayors Ruled the World. And it was about the affinity people felt for their mayors, that at a time where Congress and the federal government was gridlocked, state governments were gridlocked, mayors were actually getting things done. I'm not sure that people have the same affinity for their mayors as much anymore, because these are challenging times for cities. They are very difficult, especially in the wake of George Floyd's murder. There is a new demand on our services. There is a new demand for how we govern and what the things that we work on. But the fact of the matter is, mayors are as important now as they have ever been or will ever be. And a good mayor understands that cities are like sharks. They have to move forward or they die. But a really good mayor understands that they have to move forward with full knowledge of the soul of their community. That isn't just change for change's sake, it's change that makes our cities better. And Mayor Spano understood that and understands that. He understands that St. Louis Park has to grow, but it has to be done consistently with the best and the highest principles of St. Louis Park. And he has demonstrated that in his 8 years as mayor and his tenure on the city council before that. I am really, as I said, honored to even be asked to say a few words on behalf of Jake or at this event, because it's a funny thing about ex-mayors, Jake, that you're going to find out fairly soon. It seems contradictory, but two things are true about ex-mayors. First of all, no one remembers who you are or anything that you ever did. But those that do will tell you that you were the best mayor of all time, and you were the greatest, and they wish you would run for office again. I will give you this piece of advice as you kind of think about going into the future. Clearly, you're wearing jeans today, so you've already kind of moved on beyond your official role as mayor. But what I say to people is, well, you should run for mayor again. And I say, Jake, or I say to them, I say, well, here's the thing. Being an ex-mayor is like getting out of prison. And once you're paroled, never go back in the joint. Just never go back. Being mayor is the highest honor you can have. It really is. I got to be 12 years as mayor of the city of St. Paul, Jake 8 here in St. Louis Park. He understands the honor that public service is. But he also understands the sacrifice that public service is. The time that's spent away from Kate and your children. The time that you don't get to do just whatever you want because you have to go to another event and another event after that. But you do it because you love public service. You do it because you have a calling. You do it because you want to make your city better and you want to serve all of those that call St. Louis Park home. Jake, you have served your city well. As you prepare to give your final state of the city, know that it is about setting the tone for generations to come, future growth of St. Louis Park, and future opportunities for all that call this home. So I just want to congratulate you and thank you for your tenure as mayor of the city of St. Louis Park.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. God, you guys, we've only been doing this for 8 years. How many times? Okay, so now I have a favor to ask. All of you who are over there, can you come over here? This isn't like Sunday church. You don't get to backbench this. You don't get to, just come on over. Mostly because I don't want to be looking back and forth and back. Well, first off, thank you, Mayor Coleman, for the introduction. He's given most of my speech, right, actually, so I don't have maybe don't have as much to share, but I do have a few thoughts that I wanted to just reflect on today. Following my remarks, Alexa's, I think she mentioned she's going to be doing some tours of the building. I want to thank the West End and 10 West End here for hosting us and really appreciate it. This building is fantastic. It's maybe the second or third time I've been in here, and it's still a real jewel for all of us. I also just want to recognize a few people who are here. I know Sue Budd, Councilmember Sue Budd, Councilmember Tim Browson, I think was here but had to go. I know former city manager and former city council member Jim Brimmeyer was here earlier, but he also had to go. That is Councilmember Nadia Muhammad, who's trying to sneak in here that is the worst sneak in I've ever seen in my life. Councilmember Lynette Dumalag, Councilmember Yolanda Ferris, Councilmember Margaret Rogg, Ward 1 Councilmember, is here. I see Colin Cox from the school board is here. Did I miss any other elected officials if you're here? Did I miss? Other than Mayor Coleman? Okay. Well, thank you all for being here. I was asked to keep my remarks under 2 hours, so I better get started. Here at my last State of the City, I wanted to take a slightly different approach. While there's a lot of great things that are happening in our community, This transition period felt like an important moment for me to reflect and for us to reflect on a lot of things that we have accomplished and some lessons that I have learned as we chart our path forward. So as some of you may know, I am a big believer in making sure that there is meaning in everything that we do at an event like this. So when I started on the council a dozen years ago, this event was held at 7:30 in the morning in the basement of a business because that's when the Chamber of Commerce had their meetings. Loved the chamber, but that didn't feel like the most inclusive opportunity to bring people together. And over the years, this event has evolved to include the business community, the school district, and nonprofit partners. I saw Derek Riza from STEP, I think, was here. And all of those locations and those partners were chosen for a reason. So we chose this location today to showcase, yes, the latest jewel in the crown of the West End. More importantly, we chose this place because the West End teaches us an important lesson, one that I have learned over the last 12 years in service to my city, and that is to survive, you must adapt. More than 20 years in the planning and building stages through global financial meltdowns and global pandemics, the West End is now coming into its full fruition as a vibrant and engaging space to live, work, and play, the place that we imagined it might be someday. So like St. Louis Park, the West End is full of resilience, hope, and power. I asked Chris to be here because my time in his office as the marketing director of the City of St. Paul was transformational for me in a couple of important ways. Now, first off, yes, I like to tell people that on my tombstone, it will probably say like 3 or 4 things. It will say father, husband, mayor, and the crashed ice guy. I am still, to this day, people still say to me, oh, yeah, you're the guy that did the Red Bull crashed ice stuff in St. Paul. But I asked Chris to be here because my time with him was really, really important. I had spent a half a dozen incredible years working for Senator Klobuchar around the state of Minnesota. And of course, that work is broad in scope and distant in space. And sometimes it's glacial in its pace. I learned from her the value of doing the work. There is no one I have worked with who works harder than she does. And it took some time for me to adjust, but working in Chris's office was very much about living where your feet are. You've heard this phrase, right? Like, be where you are. Don't be someplace else, be where you are. And in doing so, I realized the power of local government to improve people's lives. I realized that if the Federal Highway Administration shut down today for a month, we'd still be able to drive on the freeways. But if we stop taking out people's trash for 4 weeks, we've got a real problem on our hands. I also experienced a great model in local leadership, watching him along with Paul Williams and Aaron Dady and now Judge Sarah Gruing and Nancy Homans and Ann Hunt, all of the people that Chris surrounded himself with in an effort to make their neighbors' lives just a little bit better. Chris showed me how someone with a compass and a clear mind could make their neighbors' lives better. And I want to share 2 quick stories. And I hope you'll feel the feels because I'm feeling them too. I'll just try and kind of keep them a little bit under control. The first one happened in 2013. I was maybe 18 months into my time on council, and there was a horrible rock slide at a park in St. Paul that killed 2 children from St. Louis Park. They were students at Peter Hobart, Mohammed Fafana and Haisim Sani. And I knew nothing about it when it happened, but when I walked into the mayor's sort of office space, you walk right by the mayor's office. And as I did, I sort of waved at him as I was walking by, and there was a cop in his office, and he hollered at me to come, get in here. And if you've ever spent any time around Chris, like the tone and the way he said it was different, right? It wasn't like, hey, swing in here when you get a second. It was, Jake, get in here. And I thought, okay, I'm either going to be fired or there's something really important happening. And he told me what we knew, which was that a rock slide had happened. There were children that were missing, and we don't know anything more. And I walked back to my office, and I walked back to my office in a daze. I didn't know what to do. I paced a lot up and down the halls, and then Chris walked down to my office, walked in the door, and said, "Can I talk to you for a second?" And he closed the door. And again, I'm like, I'm either going to get fired or there's something, But what he said, "Could I give you a piece of advice?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "There's a time for leaders to be in their community. Go home." Right? Because I didn't know where I should be. I was like, should I be here? Should I go to the rock slide site? Should I go back to my neighborhood? I don't know what to do. That was a tremendous moment of clarity for me, and is really one of the characteristics that I experienced and wish I had more of that Chris has, which is clarity of mind. He knew at that moment not only where a leader should be, but also that somebody that he cared about needed him to say that. The second one was much more humorous. Practically anything could be much more humorous than that. The year that they made same-sex marriage legal in the state of Minnesota, Chris calls me into his office and says, "I want to put pride flags on the Wabasha Bridge." Now, if any of you have been to St. Paul, you know that the Wabasha Bridge usually has American flags flying from Memorial Day to Veterans Day. And we take them down, the city takes them down in November because they get pretty beat up over the winter, and they replace them with new ones in May. The legislature changes the law in early May, and Chris says, "I want to fly pride flags. And then when Memorial Day comes, we'll take those down and we'll put the American flags." So we do. I get a phone call from somebody who is really grumpy about the fact that there are pride flags, that we have taken the American flags down, and there are pride flags flying on the bridge. And being a good staffer, I was trying to protect the mayor from the criticism. And I said, "Well, I appreciate that, sir. We're doing our best. We think that this is a good reflection of our community's values, et cetera." No, he says, "I want to know the name of the person who authorized that." And, and over the course of a few days, we sort of did this dance, but he kept coming back and asking more persistent. And finally I said, he was making noises about, I'm going to go to the press, I'm going to do this. And so I just went into Chris's office and I said, "Hey, I want you to know, I'm going to tell him that I made this decision," right? And Chris said to me, he said, "Jake, here's what you're going to tell this guy. You're going to say that the person who authorized the placement of those flags is Christopher B. Coleman, the mayor of the city of St. Paul, and here's his cell phone if you'd like to call him and talk to him about it." And I was like, "I got it. I'll tell him it's the mayor's office." And he said, "Jake, you didn't hear me. This is what I want you to say. His name is Christopher B. Coleman. He is the mayor of the city of St. Paul, and here's his cell phone number." And those two experiences were really, really important for me because one of them was, again, as I said, is about like clarity of mind and being able to focus on that thing that's most important. But the second one was about like, just lean into the punch, for God's sake, right? Don't duck it, right? Own it. And I've tried to do that. I have not always been successful at that, I will say, but I've tried to embody those two characteristics because they are lessons that Chris gave to me in my service with him. And I just wanted to say on behalf of myself, our community here is better because he was the mayor of St. Paul and I got to work for him. So thank you, Chris. And by the way, Chris also knew how to take his work seriously, but not himself seriously. And you can ask him anytime about how many Springsteen concerts he's been at, how many Red Bulls he's had to drink on the road because he was at a meeting till 6 o'clock at night and then drove to Madison to go see a show, then drove back the next morning. True stories, between that and Crashed Ice and pizza and beers at Skinner's. I really, really appreciate him and his being here. So my reason for serving on city council and becoming mayor was to try to do a little bit of what Chris had done and what others had done before me to make things just a little bit better for our community. Now, it is up to others to figure out whether or not I or any of us on council have been successful at that. What I can say with certainty is there have been some pretty incredible moments that we have shared over the last 12 years. And while I've talked about a couple, I want to share just a little list of a few to jog your memory. First off, we grew up and became a city of over 50,000 people, 50,010. We broke ground and then we broke the budget on light rail. We hosted 2 naturalization ceremonies for hundreds of new Americans, which if you've never been to one of those ceremonies before, put it on your list because it is absolutely one of the most inspiring things you will ever experience. We built The Rock, the Westwood Hills Nature Center, and we rebuilt City Hall. We lived through the rebuild of Highway 100. We pioneered new community-based development models in places like this, here in the West End, and Texatonka, and Excelsior and Grand, something that suburbs were never doing at the time. In fact, Sean and I and Jennifer were leading a tour of a group from Baltimore who was in town this week, visiting places all over the Twin Cities, and they wanted to come to St. Louis Park to hear about the work that we had done. So thank you to Jennifer and Sean. We had last year's water main breaks, didn't we, Sue? Sue Budd, who's the ward council member there, she was like 4 or 5 months into her term in office, and all of a sudden we had 60 people who literally had raw sewage backed up into their basements. And I remember like the 2 of us talking about it, and her being like, does this happen? How often does this happen? Not very often, knock on wood. We also had events like last night's vigil at Bethel and the interfaith event at Westwood Lutheran after the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting, both of which remind us of the importance of being in community with your neighbors, especially when you aren't a member of that community. Overhauling our solid waste program to be the first in the state to offer curbside organics collection. I cut a lot of ribbons with a lot of kids. We confronted a once-in-a-lifetime global pandemic in COVID. I was a singing suburban mayor at Minroast, if anybody remembers that. We became a leader in race equity and affordable housing. And if we ever doubt ourselves in that, ask other cities, they'll tell you. There were lots of trips to Congress and the White House to advocate for resources to help us invest in our community. There was COVID. We said goodbye to an outstanding city manager in Tom Harmoning and hired another outstanding city manager in Kim Keller. Our neighbor George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis, and the world continues to change because of it. We welcomed the Thai Buddhist temple, Wat Pram, and its monks and its community into our community, and we are all the better for it. Thank you, PD. Thank you, Ian, for being here. We passed the state's most aggressive climate action plan, which, by the way, I will just say, disappointingly, is still the most aggressive climate action plan in the state. So other cities need to step it up. I invented or stole or borrowed and then overused the following phrases frequently. Drink, drive, flush. Is the juice worth the squeeze? We are balancing responsive and responsible. You know what cemeteries are full of? Indispensable people. The only thing more expensive than a $600 million jet is a $500 million jet that gets shot down by the $600 million jet. Now, to be clear, I never used that. That was my predecessor, Jeff, used that all the time, but I should have. And did I say COVID? But the moments I'll remember most are the less public ones. Building friendships with my colleagues on the council over a beer after our meetings, supporting and being supported by other community leaders in this state and across the country, meditating regularly with one of the monks at Wat Pram, hosting dozens of kids as mayor for a day. That is awesome too, by the way. I'm so glad that I got a chance to do that. And especially riding with our plow drivers, our police officers, and public works staff as they serve all of us. My son once was asked, like, what's your dad's job? And he said, my dad does 3 things as mayor. He meets with people, he drinks coffee, and he makes decisions. And he wasn't wrong about that, but it's city staff that are the ones that make those decisions into action. And they deserve our thanks and our appreciation. And I want to say thank you to all of you. And the last one I want to share with you is maybe a moment that I'm probably most proud of all of the things I've been involved in. Right after the Parkland shooting happened, a group of high school students approached me and said, we're walking out of the high school in protest. And we want you to know about that. Now, of course, you can imagine, like, as a parent and as a mayor, like, my mind immediately goes into, okay, like, what's going on here? How do we keep them safe? Where are they going? Where are they going to walk to? Like, how's this going to work? And in talking with the students, we sort of made a plan. They were going to march out of the school, and they were going to march to our fire station. We were going to clear out the fire station, and the kids were going to be able to rally there. And I said to the students, so when you get there, what are you going to do with all of that energy? You're going to have hundreds of kids that are going to want to know, where do we go from here? And so they organized the League of Women Voters, and we talked to different people. They broke their, like, they created federal, state, and local government lobby groups, right? They had, like, all of this action was happening at this rally. And as soon as the rally was over, the group of local, activist group, the local government group, came right up to me, and they were like, what are we going to do to get guns off of our streets? And I was like, okay, I meant action, but, like, can I just get a little bit of a breather before we go right into action? But no, they were like, no, we got to go. So I had a lot of conversations with them, and I had been talking with the owner of the Frontiersman. The Frontiersman is the only gun store in St. Louis Park. And the owner of the gun store is a really, really reasonable guy named Corey. And I reached out to Corey to talk to him about the experience that I had and to tell him that these students wanted to ban guns in St. Louis Park, and they wanted to ban his store in St. Louis Park. And would he be open to having a conversation with them about this? And his response was really, really amazing. He said, yes, I sell a deadly weapon. It's okay for me to hear this conversation and be present to that. So we set up the community room on the first floor of City Hall with a bunch of upset high school students, scared for their lives, who want to ban guns, and a guy who makes his living selling guns. And we started having a conversation, and I had sort of, prepared the kids and Corey to listen, just to try and listen as much as they could. So they shared their experiences, and they talked for like an hour and a half. Well, I had to go pick up my kid from hockey practice, and I just left them in the room, right? They were having a really good dialogue. I called my wife on the phone and I said, I'm going to get Flynn to practice. She goes, well, how did the meeting go? Everybody okay? Was there, they're yelling and screaming? And I said, no, they're still in there. They're talking. And she's like, you left a bunch of angry high school students, really, powerful and righteous high school students in a room with a guy who they want to run out of town. I said, yeah, and I think they're going to be okay. Like, they're working it out. Corey called me like 2 or 3 days later and said that he was going to be pulling a certain range of weapons out of his store. And it wasn't a huge number, right, to be clear. But those kids, those young adults, and that person had a thoughtful, considered, respectful conversation with each other. It landed in the right spaces. And there are fewer of these sorts of assault-style weapons on our streets today because of that. And not just because of the kids, but also because of Corey. And that dialogue and discussion that feels like when we get it right, is when people who feel really, really strongly are able to share those feelings and work collectively at change in a respectful way. And I've tried to do my best to be that. I've not always, as I said, I've not always been successful at that. But that was one moment where I felt like our civic culture was really healthy. It was really healthy. And I think if any of you had been in the room to see them talking with each other and asking questions of each other and talking about their fears, and especially for the students to hear Corey talk about all of the things that he does to try and prevent selling guns to people who should not have them, it was really amazing. And it was amazing for the students to hear that, right? It was amazing for the students to hear Corey talk about the elderly man who came in, asked for the least expensive handgun in the place, and then asked if they sell ammunition in less than a box. And Corey told these students, I'm sorry, sir, I can't sell this weapon to you. And could I help you? Could I connect you with some resources? Because he knew why that person was buying that weapon. And those students needed to hear that. And I think in our world these days, We get in our tribes, we get in our groups, and we don't necessarily talk to each other, and especially we don't necessarily listen to each other. And so in that moment, that was one of my proudest moments because I felt like it wasn't about me, but it was about that space that this city has created over generations. And so that was one of my happiest moments. So I'm highlighting these because they are the cornerstones of a community. They are people. Places, projects, and policies are nothing if they aren't reflected and rooted in improving people's lives. Because to do this job, you have to love people, including the ones who don't love you so much. In fact, especially the ones who don't love you so much. And that includes Michelle. Michelle is the woman, and if anybody here is named Michelle, this isn't about you. I don't think. Michelle is the woman who sent me a daily reminder email during our pandemic that I was a something, 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 and it wasn't very nice. You are a socialist piece of, and then I'll leave the rest to you. Michelle's email was a reminder that I was flawed in her eyes. And truth be told, she was right. I mess up all the time. We all do, because we're human. But with a lot of help and support, we work through our mistakes, and we move the ball just a bit further down the field in the communities that we love. And as much as you love your community and the people in your community, you have to love your friends and your family more, because this is a family business. Anyone who has served in public life knows how much our friends and our family give up so that we can do this work. And this is why it's a good time for me to step away. I have parents and family that I want to support. I have kids that are starting their lives in faraway places, and I want to experience that with them. But more than anything, it's time for me to prioritize my wife's schedule over my own. So ladies and gentlemen, the First Lady of St. Louis Park, Kate McDonald. I love you. I've missed a lot of things for my family because of my work over the years. But Kate has always been able to remind me to stay grounded and be where my feet are. And so I made a lot more than I missed. Even when I was campaigning, right, I would door knock in neighborhoods where the kids had soccer games so that I could quick hit those doors and then go catch the ends of their soccer games. But she is the most important person in my life, and I want to spend more time with her, and I want to be more focused on her schedule and her wants. So one of my favorite sayings over the years has been that easy is for other cities, that we do the hard stuff because that's the stuff that's worth doing. As I finish my time as our mayor, I am looking ahead to the future of our community with optimism and with gratitude, because together we have made incredible strides towards a more inclusive, sustainable, just, and innovative city. We should continue to prioritize our race equity and inclusion, invest in our environment and sustainability efforts, and foster a community where every single one of us can thrive. I have full confidence in the capable hands that will lead us forward on our council and with our staff. Please stay engaged, please stay inspired, and let's shape a future that all of us can be proud of. Thank you for giving me the privilege of serving all of you. Thank you.